Then you also make mention of overbuilding can come up in different dimensions, talking about individuals on maybe a site, as in a city, in a country, and so on and so forth, like that. Does it mean if proper planning are not done, necessary setback are not done, and at the end of the day, we are having more building sited in a city? Is that what you are trying to tell us, sir?
Let's take some examples so we can buttress the points so it can be clearer.
Okay.
For example, let's take it on a local site level, on a building scale. Sometimes you get requirements from your clients who says, I just like large bedrooms. I just like it large. Sometimes they will ask for what they don't know. The size of a 2 garage, they want it for 1 bedroom. And when it's built and it's done, how many stays there? What happens in that bedroom? Then they then behold a large space and they're wondering what they can use that space into. When they can't find full use for that space, it then becomes an overbuilt thing. That's one. Another way to look at it is, for example, you've built a house and you have built more than what the local planning authority have agreed that you should build in that area. Because depending on the area and the location, there are certain percentage of the land that they think your building footprint can be on, so that you can have other uses for the land around. For people to collect, to gather, for people to use the soil, for rubbish to be gathered, for treatment to be done, for air to be around the environment. So for example, they may say in the GRA, you should not build more than 30% of the land that you have allocated to you. If you do more than that, you have overbuilt. That will affect your footprint on the land. It will affect some generation of air. Trees that should be planted, shrubs, green that should be there, will be affected because you have overbuilt that land. Remember, human building, it's an impact on the natural environment. And we must find a balance between that impact of building on the natural environment so that the natural environment can also yield us of its own benefit. So we can have a symbiotic relationship and an adequate one. And that has to do with how we build, what we build with, and in what area we build. And that's why I said it can be at a building level, it can be at a street level, a community level, or at a national level. For example, again, if you look at some developing estates around, let's take a local environment at Ile-Ife. Most of the buildings are just sprawling. There are no plannings directly affecting what's going on. But meanwhile, the land that is being sprawling built as residential now were or used to be agricultural land. You then ask yourself, are we not tending towards food insecurity the more? Because where will the food be produced if we're taking over most of the agricultural land for residential planning now, for residential use? Have we changed land use? Have we secured new agricultural land elsewhere? These are issues. And we can't keep sprawling.
Part of the overbuilding that we are talking about.
Yeah, it's part of the overbuilding, yeah.
The land that is reserved for agriculture, we are now building on it. It's overbuilding.
On it, doing residential planning. We're overbuilding. Because we've got to think not just about new development, sure. We've got to think of conservation of the ones we built. We've got to think of conserving or rethinking of the ones we have built for new use, refurbishing. Those are needful things we've got to do to keep the built environment tidy and good. Not only new sites all the time. And by the time you are doing a new site, which means you are acquiring a new land use in some cases, or you are working within the land use appropriated for that space. You've got to be able to think through and be sure you are doing it rightly. And of course, also, we got to think, if you are building high,
Okay.
and it has to be in a concentrated area,
Area.
services to those places will matter. Services in terms of air, that will maybe get polluted, overpopulation may happen. How do people get access to land, to play, to gather, and many other things? All those got to be thought about so that we can be sure we still, as social beings, can relate very well and have good health and well-being in those areas where we're living. And of course, in those new areas, we're opening up. But remember, in opening up a new area, it's a different land use or it's a different scenario that the built environment will do to the existing natural environment, and we've got to do it right if it must be sustainable.
Sir, I want you to help me to educate our viewers. You talk about 70-30%. That is, the most approval is to build on 30% of the land. The 70%, what are we expected to make use of the 70% for?
Okay, let's give another example.
Okay.
For example, if you buy land freehold, generally from vendors in town, the sizes are different from what you buy if you buy from government. That's because one is thinking about area you can build and that area must be satisfiable. The other is not. So in town, they will generally tell you buy 2-3 plots so that it can be enough for what you want to do. They should have given you enough as one plot to build. For example, if you take the one plot, just the minimum setback required by law for you from the perimeter of the building, that is set out for small residential places, 3 meters from the perimeter. By the time you do it that for a land that is just about 600 square meters, you're already at 50%. That's the maximum you can do. But the law says you don't build up to 50%. So you then think, what and how do you get parking on that land if you have a multiple occupation? How do you get the water treated on that land? Because government hasn't been doing that. They have left that that work to individuals.
Yes.
How do you get your power or alternate power supply on that land? How do you get your rubbish collected or distributed or treated on that land? You need areas for that. Or minimally, just think